Hello guys, this is me Simu Orohara, and in this video I will try to talk about the Quincy and exactly about two parties of the Quincy. The Quincy of 1000 years ago, which are the Wandenreich, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name incorrectly, and the Quincy who were settled in the real world. And by connecting the two parties we will try to know what happened after the battle of juha and yamaji 1000 years ago. And also we will talk about the real world Quincy and their relationship with the Wandenreich. While the last arc was mainly centered on the Quincy, I don't know why Kobo didn't shed a little light on the real world Quincy, especially since during some of the last chapters it appeared that some of them were related to the Wandenreich, like Ishida Sugen, and many other things we will get to in a bit. Of course, what I mean by the real world Quincy are the Quincy who stayed in the real world and did not disappear with juha in the shadows 1000 years ago in the series. Through Hirschfeld and Busby's flashback, we knew that juha has started during that period to form the Sternreicher army, and he was conquering several Quincy's kingdoms in the real world in order to create that army. A good example of that is Busby and Hirschfeld were victims of that civil war that juha was leading to form his army. And when juha gathered his army, at one point he went to the Soul Society to declare war on the Shinigami. So after he went, the Quincy who didn't join his army remained in the real world. There is no doubt that many of them were against juha's policy in starting a war against the Shinigami in Soul Society in the first place. So they continued to live in the real world normally, while juha and his army of Sternreicher were severely defeated by the Shinigami led by Yamaji and the Soul Society. Undoubtedly, most of juha's army was killed. Only a few Sternreicher survived, like Hirschfeld, Busby and juha himself. So after that loss and through juha's words, it appears that whoever was left from his army, they went back to the real world, and after that they decided to hide inside the shadows of the Serity using the free flow of Reishi. And I still don't know how they exactly did that. I think we needed a flashback for this point. Actually, we need a lot of flashbacks for the final arc. However, what's important is that the Shinigami believed in the end of that bloody war that they got rid of juha and his army, and the only Quincy's left were the ones who didn't participate in that war and were living in the real world. So I think in the years after juha defeat, the Quincy community blossomed, especially after they got rid of juha. But at the same time, the real world Quincy had an identity, affiliation and tradition, and among those traditions was killing hollows and removing them from the existence. And this was the origin of the problem between Shinigami and Quincy, because removing hollows from the existence, it harms the balance of the real world and the Soul Society, and as a result clashes between them and the Shinigami happened in the centuries after juha's defeat, which eventually led 200 years ago to the decisions to exterminate them. So only a few remained, and among of them was the Ishida family. In fact, whether the Wandenreich or Quincy who stayed in the real world, we don't have much information about them. For example, who was the person or people who supervised the preservation of the Wandenreich combined and united all those centuries, and who created the medal to steal the Bankai of the Shinigami and develop the holy release to the full standing, and the secret of living all those centuries, especially that juha was apparently in a state of complete disability after his defeat against Yamaji. Many questions, but we will try to answer some of them. And speaking of the real world Quincy, I find this party the most attached to their principle as a Quincy in terms of tradition, garment and ritual, and the most prominent example of this is the Ishida family, in a particular Yuryu himself. He inherited all of that dress-related culture and satiated the pride of the Quincy from his grandfather. Mayuri even confirmed this in this terrible scene when he was explaining to Yuryu how he was experimenting with some Quincy in a horrific, brutal ways. Mayuri said that before that, they continued to chant these slogans about the pride of the Quincy. This pride was made very clear in the past of everything but the rain, In that past, Kobo gave us some informations about the way this group of Quincy community lives, where it was revealed to us that the Quincy also had families similar to the noble families in the Shinigami side, such as the Kuchiki, Shohin, etc. In the Quincy community, we also saw that the Ishida family are considered like a noble family, a noble Quincy with pure blood. There were also the Kurosaki family, which is also considered a noble family, but unfortunately only one of them remained, which is Masaki, Ichigo's mother. In that period the number of Quincy became very few, therefore what was left of them were families who wanted to continue to maintain the pure blood by marrying one another, so it was planned that Masaki would marry by Ryuken. We also knew that there are a hybrid Quincy, and I think it means a Quincy who had one normal human parent. This category was considered a second-class Quincy. We noticed that in the Ishida family they were servants and they usually formed the first classes in fights. So the atmosphere of that family, as I said, made you feel the identity of the Quincy and the pride of being a Quincy. On the other side, I unfortunately didn't find those things in the Wandenreich and exactly most of the Sternreicher. There is no comparison between this category and the real world Quincy. The subtitle for the last arc was in bold: The Final Holy War. But when you see the last arc fights, which were supposed to revolve around the meaning of that sentence, on the conflict of Quincy's philosophy against the Shinigami's philosophy, about what Quincy believes and what the Shinigami believes, we didn't find any of this. Only Sternreicher fighting in strange shapes and weird abilities. It doesn't relate to any way to the things we knew about the Quincy. Perhaps what confirms this is the chapter 591 when Kirgi talked about the Quincy last style technique that Yuri used against Mayuri, and the fact that it's outdated old technique and it doesn't compare to the new technique while standing. And here Kirgi adds a very important sentence. He said that the only man who was insistent on using it is Ishida Sugen, who was against our development and studies. Kirgi words open many questions about the relationship of the Quincy who were in the Wandenreich and between the Quincy who stayed in the real world. From the words of Kirgi, it appears that Sugen Ishida was aware of the presence of the Wandenreich, and maybe a lot of other Quincy who stayed in the real world knew about the Wandenreich. So if we want to connect things, I expect that after the major battle between Bach and Yamaji and the defeat of Bach's army and the latter suffering a fatal injury, somehow he managed to escape with whoever battle survivor were with him. And as we said before, at that time they may have moved to hide in the shadow of the city. The most important thing is that those who survived from the Sternreicher stayed for maybe a century, recovering from the effects of that battle and the shock of what happened, then started implementing their great plan, and the plan was restoring Bach, the king of the Quincy, to his former power and forming the Sternreicher army again. And I don't know precisely how the remaining Sternreicher managed to plan all these things for centuries. We all know that Bach was sealed for 900 years. Was he sending instruction to Harzwald while being sealed? Or did Harzwald already have those instructions and was set out to implement them with those who survived? The important thing is that clearly to those who survived the previous battle, their power as a Quincy was not enough to confront Yamaji and those with him. For that reason, the Wandenreich thought about developing their powers, but this time through scientific research, in order to develop their Quincy techniques as well as studying the Shinigami, in order to develop a weapon that reduces the danger of the most powerful of the Shinigami's weapons, which is the Bankai. There is no doubt in that battle the Bankai was one of the great reasons that led to the defeat of Bach and his army. Therefore, the Sternreicher tried to find a solution to this problem by inventing the medal, as well as finding a solution to the last style technique, because the last style technique was known to make its owner lose their power after using it. So they developed the last style technique to the vault standing, which gives you more power without losing your Quincy powers. Of course, these things did not just happen in months or years. I think that the Wandenreich continued their studies for centuries, until they reached these developments. And here I will link the Wandenreich and the real world Quincy. As I said before, there is no doubt that after the defeat of Juha, Bach, many of his followers died and a few remained. So those who were planning to his return, and I think they were undoubtedly supervised by Hirschwald, they needed a second army of Sternreicher to join them in the Wandenreich. Where they will find them? Yes, in the real world. So I think there was a special secret squad that went to the real world Quincy to include them in their ranks and convince them that they now have what could make them stronger. So some of the Sternreicher we saw might be from different centuries. For example, we saw that Juha Bach had visited Eisnot in the hospital. Maybe some of the Sternreicher were part of the Wandenreich centuries ago, but didn't have the letters until Juha Bach woke up and gave them these letters and abilities. The important thing is that the leaders of the Wandenreich, I think they assigned a special squad to attract the new soldiers, like the same way as in the past, but in a complete secrecy as not to draw the attention of the Shinigami. And so I think that some of them were convinced by the idea of the Wandenreich and joined them, and others from noble families didn't accept that, including Sogen Ishida. There is no doubt that he received an offer from the Wandenreich to join them, because in the chapter 674, Ishin and Ryuken talked about this, and they said that Soken used this gate to escape when he was exiled, and I don't know what they meant by exiled, but it may be that Soken Ishida may at some point have received a request to join the Wandenreich, and he maybe accepted this offer at first and went with them, but after seeing what they were planning, he expected that power they were seeking for would strip him of being a Quincy, and that it will make him just a human machine or a monster, so he decided to oppose them, and therefore was exiled and used that gate to escape. It is possible that the Wandenreich exiled many of those who were against their approach. So the Quincy who stayed in the real world found himself between the Shinigami who wanted to get rid of them and the Wandenreich who were trying to make them join. Who knows, maybe the Wandenreich were a contributor to the extinction of the Quincy by filtering whoever were against them, as Juha Bach did 1000 years ago. See how many blank lines need explanation. So many, from how Juha Bach defeated to how he survived, and how they established their kingdom within the city, and who was organizing things in the kingdom while Juha Bach was sealed. Also, how was the connection established between them and the Quincy who lived in the real world? How did the Sternreicher live all these centuries? Was it because of the shadows? Did it help them survive that long? If Kobo had answered these questions, I would have accepted the Sternreicher, even though they didn't have an identity, but neglecting all these points as well as neglecting the identity of the Quincy and not focusing on it made it worse. Because with all this background that Quincy had and the background that the Shinigami have, we would have seen a bloody holy war. On the top of that, slaking into Juha Bach's real background in his relationship with the Soul King, all of those things would have given us a delicious menu of battles that Bleach is known for, with a distinctive historical and dramatic line. And again, I'm gonna say that I hope to see those answers in the new season of the anime, and at least how Juha Bach was defeated against Yamaji. So guys, this is the end of my video, and see you in my next video.